Okay, so this is Teacher Kezwa once again, and today we are going to look at the some concepts that can be applied in terms of the frequency distribution table. Okay, so the concept we are going to look at is the cumulative frequency, relative frequency in terms of proportion, relative frequency percentage, cumulative frequency in proportion, then cumulative frequency what in percentage. So this table is actually a frequency distribution table that is actually presenting or representing scores obtained by 6 universities in a recent quiz competition. So the universities are Pentecost University, KNUST, University of Ghana, UCC, UDS, UHAS. Okay, so anytime you are being given a frequency distribution table, you have to pay attention to the values that have been given and the ones that actually are not given. Okay, so this table like this, if you look at this carefully, we have frequencies that have been given. So this frequency actually represents the scores that was being obtained by the universities. Okay, and you could see that we don't have total frequency over here. That is missing. Okay, and if you look at this one too, these ones, so all these spaces here, we have to what fill them. Okay, but when we look at this frequency distribution table, in statistics, we have some principles that actually that apply that are constant principles. And the principle is that when you are dealing with a relative frequency, okay, relative frequency will always in terms of proportion. So relative frequency can actually be expressed in proportion and what percentage. When you are expressing a relative frequency in proportion, the total will give you one. Okay, so that means that even if you don't know how to calculate it and you know the basic statistics principle, you can just go ahead to write here one. Okay, and when you are expressing relative frequency in terms of percentage, your total is also what automatically what 100. So that one too, you can also write 100 even before you start to solve anything. Are you getting it? And the cumulative frequency, we don't have total for it. Okay, but the thing is that the cumulative frequency will always sum up to the total frequencies. That means that if I know this frequency, I can know the value here. Okay, and the same way to the cumulative frequency in proportion to that one too will not have total over here. Okay, but that one too the same thing, it will also sum up the cumulative frequency in terms of percentage, we always in terms of proportion, we also give you what one. Okay, and the same way to the cumulative frequency in terms of percentage, we also give you what 100. Do you get it? Okay, so now we can go ahead to solve. Now, in solving the cumulative frequency, the principle is that your first frequency is your first what cumulative frequency. So in this case, we will have what 45 over here. Now, with your next cumulative frequency, you have to add this 45 here, the first cumulative frequency plus the second frequency over here. Okay, so in that case, this one is going to give us what? 45 plus 30, which is going to give us what? 75. Now, to get the cumulative frequency for University of Ghana, we have to add cumulative frequency for KNUST to that of the frequency of what? The University of Ghana. Okay, so that one is going to be 75 plus what? 28. And that's going to give us what? 103. Okay. Now, to get the cumulative frequency for UCC, we have to add the cumulative frequency of University of Ghana to that of the frequency of UCC. That's going to be 103, 103 plus what? 308 plus 34. Okay. That's going to give us what? 137. The same principle applies. So we are going to add 137 towards 25, and that's going to give us what? 162. Okay, now the last one, so the cumulative frequency for U has will be 162 plus what 18, and that's going to give us what 180. So automatically, once we get our 180 here, it means that the total frequency is also what 180. So you can also, if you are in doubt, you can add everything together and realize that you will still get what the same 180. Okay, all right. So we will not have any total here. So you can say dash. Okay. Now let's come to the relative frequency proportion. So in expressing relative frequency in terms of proportion, all right, so now let's look at the relative frequency. So the relative frequency, it can be expressed in terms of what? Proportion or percentage. So maybe in an examination, they can just bring only one column here like relative frequency. So once you see relative frequency, that one, you will decide whether to use the proportion to calculate it or the percentage to calculate it. But if the exams, if let's say in terms of the question, they say relative frequency proportion, that means you have to strictly what go by it. Because I'm teaching, that's why I'm teaching both so that you know how to apply both of them. Okay. So now, with regards to relative frequency in terms of proportion, it's going to be so for the first one will be what? 45 over the total, which is what? 180. So it's going to be 45 over 180. And the answer is going to be what? 0.25. Okay. Uh-huh. Yeah, so always what you have to do is that at least you have to leave it what in what 2 decimal place. Okay. So now the next one is going to be what? 75 over 180, and that will be giving you what? So 0.416. That's going to be 0. So you can either leave it in 2 decimal places or 3 decimal places. Okay. So leaving it in 2 decimal places is going to give us what? 0.42. Now we'll go to the next one. That's going to be 0.103. Okay, so you see, I hope you are actually feeling what we are doing. So you realize that most students mostly make mistake, and the mistake they make is that when the table is like this, they mostly use the cumulative frequency to calculate for the relative frequency. But what we have to be using is what? Is the frequency, not the cumulative frequency. Okay. Okay, so you would realize that the first one that I did, that I used 75 over the 180 was actually a mistake. I get that way. So if you were following, you realize that that one was a mistake. So what you have, and that is a common mistake most students would do. That's why I did this in order for you to be aware of that. Okay, so the correct thing would be what? 30 over what? 180. Okay, and that's going to give us what? So 0.17. Okay. Then now the next relative frequency is going to be what? 28 over 180. So take note that it is not the cumulative frequency that you use. It is the frequency that you use to calculate for the relative frequency. So take note. So that's going to be 28 over 180. And then that will be giving us what? So 0.16. Okay, then come to the next one, which is going to be what? 34 over 180. And that one is going to give us what? 0.19. Okay, then we have 25 over 180. And that's going to give us what? So 25 over 180. 0.14. Okay, then come to the next one, which is 18 over 180. 0.1. Okay. So you see, if we add all together, you get what? 1. Okay. So now let's come to okay. So you see, over here, mostly when students do it this way, they try to add everything together. And sometimes because of the way we run the things, okay, if we were to run it like in terms of 3 decimal places or 4 decimal places, you see that when you add it, you get exactly 1. But how you run it, maybe if you run it like 2 decimal places, you are likely to get like 0. You get like 0.999 or something. That one, you will not write that one, okay, because the principle in statistics is that anytime you sum up a relative frequency, it should be what? 1, or it will be what? 1. Do you get it? Okay. So now let's look at the relative frequency in terms of what? Percentage. So in doing relative frequency in terms of percentage, it is the same thing. So it's going to be 45 over 180. But you see, anytime we are expressing something in percentage, we multiply it by what? 100. So that's going to be times what? 100. And All right, so now we are going to get what? 45. We are going to get 45 over 180 times what? 100. And that will give us what? 25. So you see this one, you shouldn't worry yourself to add percentage to it because the principle when you are doing any table later something and they write the unit on top, you should not repeat the unit again because the unit already has already what be shown. So the next one is going to be what? So it's going to be um 30 over what? 180 times what? 100. That's going to give us what? 17. Okay. Then our next distance is just it's also going to be um 28 over 180 times 100. And that's going to give us what? That's going to give us what? 16. So if you realize, you see, someone can just be multiplying this one by 100 and go their way. But the actual thing is that do it this over the total then times 100. Okay. So this one is going to give us what? 34 over, yes. So this one is going to be what? Times what? 100. Okay. So this one, in exams, actually, don't just write the numbers, don't just use a calculator to punch it and write it because if you do that, it could be that maybe somebody give you the figures and you just wrote them. We want you to show that indeed you were the one who did it. So you have to show working. Okay. So this one too is going to give us what? 19. Okay. Then we come to this one. So it's going to be 25 over 180 times 100. And the answer will be what? 14. Okay. And over here is going to be what? 18 over 180 times what? 100. And the answer is going to give us what? Um, it's going to give us 100. 10. Okay. So when you add all these things together, you get what? 100. Okay. Now let's come to cumulative frequency. See, the word cumulative here, like you might have heard cumulative GP. It's like you have one thing and you are adding up. See, and then when you go to the next semester, you add that one to it. So the same principle we are going to apply here. So cumulative frequency proportion. So we will come to what? The relative frequency what? Proportion aspect. Okay. So our first proportion here, relative proportion here becomes what? Our first what? Cumulative what? Frequency proportion. So here is going to be what? 0.25. But the first, for the second one, just as we did for the cumulative frequency, is the same principle we are going to apply here. So we are going to what? Add this 0.25 to what? 0.17. Okay. And that's going to give us what? 0.42. So for us to get the cumulative frequency for University of Ghana, it's going to be 0.42 plus 0.16. And that will be what? 0.58. Now, for our next one will be 0.58 plus what? 0.19. Okay. So 0.77. Now, our next cumulative frequency in terms of proportion will go 0.77 plus what? 0.14. So 0.91. And the next one is going to be what? 0.91 plus what? 0.1. So that one is going to be. So that's going to give us what? 1. Okay. Now, you see the principle we said earlier that anytime you solve cumulative frequency, you see that the total becomes the same as this one. You could see that now our relative frequency here in terms of the proportion was what? 1. When we add the cumulative frequency in terms of proportion, we are also getting what? 1. That means that when we do that for the cumulative frequency in terms of percentage, that one will also be giving us what? 100. Okay. So somebody can just go ahead to write it. Okay. Even before he continued to solve it. Okay. So now let's come here. So now, relative frequency percentage. So what we do is that we will come to what? Cumulative frequency percentage. So we'll be looking at what? The relative frequency what? percentage over here. So our first relative frequency percentage here will be the same for cumulative frequency what percentage. So over here is going to be what 25. Okay, our next cumulative frequency percentage will be we adding 25 plus what 17. Okay, and that's going to give us what 42. Okay, now the next one is going to be 42 plus what 16, and that's going to give what 50 50 what 8. Now the next one is going to be what 58 plus 19, and that's going to give us 77. So in fact, if you have been following the trend or if you have been following it, you realize that the answers for the proportion here, you see, because when you multiply 100 to it, you get this one. So if you have been following, you know that automatically here is going to be what? It's going to be what? 91. All right. So let's see. So this one is going to be what? 44 plus what? 14. 77, 77, okay, plus 14. And that is going to give us what? 91. Okay, so now this one is going to be what? Now we are going to get what? 91 plus what? Plus 10. Okay, and that will give us what? 101. Okay, exactly. Uh-huh. So you see that the thing is that because the reason why we are getting more than 100 is because of the decimals, how we run it. Okay, that's why I said that if so, ideally you have to maybe run it like in terms of 3 decimal place or 4. When you run it that way, you automatically get the exact for 100. But when you get this one doesn't mean that you should write 101. You have to still what write for 100 because that is the statistics for principle. Do you get it? Okay. So in summary, what I would say is that this table actually what represented what six universities, a quiz that was a scores obtained by 6 universities, okay, in the quiz competition. And the key thing you have to know is that given you should look at the missing numbers. Now another trick that your lecturer can do is that the lecturer can decide not to give you this value or the frequency. So with the table 2, you can see a question like this, which doesn't have the frequency for let's say principal university, okay, and also which does not have the frequency for what you has and that of the total. Okay, but the principle in statistics is that your total frequency will always be equal to your cumulative frequency over here. I get that way. So what you have to know is that automatically, since here is 180, automatically your total frequency also becomes what? 180. Okay. Then now the principle is that always your first frequency is your first cumulative frequency. So even if you were not given the first frequency, you know that okay, this 45 will also be the same as this one. Okay. So that means that here will be what? 45. Okay. Then now you can now add everything together and subtract it from what 180 to get the value for this one. Okay, and when you do that, you are going to get what? So when you do that, you are going to get 18. Okay, so that is that. So at any point in time, they can leave some spaces for you to fill. If assuming they leave a space here for you to fill, you should know that per the principle, you can add everything together and then subtract it from this one to get this value. Okay. So now the key thing that I want you to understand, the principle is that anytime we add relative frequency, it sums up to what? 1 in terms of proportion. If it is in terms of percentage, it sums up to what? 100. And you will not have totals for cumulative frequency and what the cumulative frequency was percentage. Okay, so that one you can just put dash there. But remember that your total, like here, when you sum everything here, is going to be 1 for proportion, and here is going to be what 100. Okay,